Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. My name is Tahira Naqvi, and I'm here on behalf of the Auliyacouncil of North America. And I'm here again in our series on Sufism with Rachana Rao Umashankar. We have talked before about Sufism. We've talked about its beginnings and tackled some of the questions that our younger friends may have. So today, I thought I would ask Rachana to talk to us about Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya, which may seem very familiar to some of us, and the name may seem very familiar, and to others, the name may be like, who is this person and why do we need to talk about him? So I thought that I would ask Rachana to tell us exactly why we need to talk about Nizamuddin Auliya during this conversation on Sufism.
Right. Thank you for inviting me again into this conversation. So perhaps we should start by giving some historical context for Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya, where he fits into the larger picture of Sufism. So, as some of you may know, with Sufism, there are multiple orders, multiple Sufi orders. The technical term for it is a silsila, or a chain. Mm-hmm. And these are orders that are formed through a chain of master-disciple relationships. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Nizamuddin Auliya is part of a Sufi order that is very prominent in South Asia. Mm-hmm. And this Sufi order is known as the Chishtiya or the Chishti Sufi order. Right. And this Sufi order gets its name from Moinuddin Chishti, who is the originator of this Sufi order. He himself gets his name from Chisht, which is a place in Afghanistan. So he comes to South Asia and sets up his Sufi lodge, and through his disciples and his disciples' disciples, we get the emergence of the Chishti Sufi order. So starting with Moinuddin Chishti, then his most prominent disciple is Qutubuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki. Mm-hmm. After that, you have Fariduddin Ganshakar, who is also known as Baba Farid. And then his disciple is Nizamuddin Auliya.
So they're all located in South Asia.
Yes, but in different parts of South Asia.
Could you give us a sense of where they are spread out?
Yeah, I hope I get this right. Mm-hmm. And Moinuddin Chishti's shrine is in Ajmer. Mm-hmm. Okay. And sorry, I'm going to sneeze here. Moinuddin Chishti, sorry, it took a moment. Moinuddin Chishti's shrine is in Ajmer. Qutubuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki's shrine is in Delhi. Fariduddin Ganshakar's shrine is in Pakpathan. Mm-hmm. And the Nizamuddin Auliya's shrine is back in Delhi again, right? So different parts.
So he traveled.
That's right. Ajmer is in Rajasthan. Mm-hmm. Ajmer is in Rajasthan. Delhi is obviously in Delhi, and Pakpathan is in
what is now Pakistan. Yes.
Yeah. But the impetus for these disciples was often to, once they were given permission to set up their own lodges, their own Sufi schools or centers, or however you want to translate the word khanqah, they left the fold of their master and went further afield. So that's why each disciple has their khanqah or their lodge and their shrine in a different location than their predecessor.
Right.
So Nizamuddin Auliya is is part of this very prominent Sufi order of South Asia. And then we can talk about the importance of the Chishti order in South Asia. But if we're, again, to contextualize this historically, Nizamuddin Auliya lived on the cusp of the 13th and the 14th century.
Okay.
So he was born in the 13th century, passed away in the 14th century. So that is the context. And I think he was born in Badaयूं in Uttar Pradesh, but he died in Delhi, and that's why his shrine is in Delhi. Yeah. And in terms of the prominence of the Chishti Sufi order, one of the reasons it's so important in South Asia is it's a homegrown Sufi order. It is a South Asian Sufi order.
Right.
It has its origins in South Asia. And this has deeply impacted the character of Chishti Sufism in terms of the worldview, in terms of practice, because it is it's not an import. It's not a form of Sufism that has its origins in Turkey or in Uzbekistan or something, and then is brought into India. It emerges in the socio-cultural religious context of 11th, 12th, 13th century India, which is an extremely dynamic time in the history of South Asia. This is the time period of the Ghurid invasions. So there's a lot of political upheaval happening in northwest India and northern India because of the invasions by these Central Asian Turkic adventurers, really, if we're talking about people like Mahmud Ghazni and
Khilji too had something to do with it.
He comes later. A little bit later. He comes later. So Nizamuddin Auliya is again born in India, born in Uttar Pradesh in India, and seeks discipleship with Fariduddin Ganj Shakar, and then eventually sets up his Sufi lodge or his khanqah, which, by the way, when I say Sufi lodge, Sufi khanqah, I mean it's a kind of a multi-purpose establishment. It functions as sort of a residential school for the most sort of the closest circle of disciples of a Sufi master, but it also functions as a place where certain social services are also provided. So food might be distributed at a khanqah. It may house
shelter, food,
all of these things,
assistance of any other kind.
Right. Yes. And of course, also a place where the disciples train in Sufi practices, sit and listen to the sermons of the teacher. So the Sufi lodge is a very important site. And Nizamuddin Auliya's khanqah is also in Delhi. In fact, just a few minutes walk away from the place where he's buried.
So it's in a separate place?
Almost always.
Oh, I see.
The
so
Sufi
it's
lodge,
not where he's buried.
No, the Sufi lodge and the khanqah and the dargah. The dargah is the Sufi shrine where the saint is buried, is almost always, it's unusual to have the khanqah and the dargah at the same site.
I see.
Usually they are at different places. And they may be proximate to each other, but they're usually separate spaces. So yeah, the khanqah of Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya is just a few minutes away from his shrine in Delhi, and it's a very beautiful. If anyone visits Delhi, Nizamuddin Auliya is easy enough to visit, but I would highly encourage people to seek out the khanqah because it's a quiet place. The shrine is a bustling place.
I know. I've been to
the shrine,
but I wasn't aware of the khanqah. So is that operative? Is that people go there still? Things happen there, or is it closed up?
It's not closed. I've visited the khanqah. People go there to pay respects to Nizamuddin Auliya, and during his urs, or his death anniversary, the marking of his death anniversary, people will also visit the the khanqah to pay their respects there. There are the caretakers of the khanqah, and but it is not as prominent a site as the tomb, the dargah of Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya. But it is. I have a very fond memory of visiting the khanqah on this. A day not unlike today, actually, a chilly, sunny Delhi winter's day, but a very, very beautiful place. So Nizamuddin Auliya is, born and bred in North India, seeks out discipleship with Fariduddin Ganj Shakar, and then sets up his lodge in Delhi. And this is quite. This is usually the case that Sufi disciples, when I say they go further afield, often they will set up their lodge in a space where there isn't one there before.
Right.
Right. So when he set up his lodge, would have been fairly close to the wilderness back then, in those days. And so he sets up his lodge at in Delhi, in the neighborhood which is now called Nizamuddin. The neighborhood is named for him. And then he dies in Delhi as well, and so is buried there. And the shrine of Nizamuddin Auliya, the dargah of Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya, is the complex that develops around his tomb,
right?
Which I said is actually in the neighborhood called Nizamuddin.
So tell us something about the role of the shrine, even though he's not there. Let's talk about today. Let's talk about the present times, and what role does he play still in the lives of people who inhabit Delhi or who live there, and what influences that had on them, his presence there.
The shrine is it's very rare to see the shrine empty. I did a lot of my research at the shrine of Nizamuddin Auliya, and I've never gone there and not seen people there. If not crowds, at least a sizable number of people. So it is very much a part of the sacred lives of people who adhere to shrine-based Sufism, who have faith in who believe in the sainthood of Hazrat Nizamuddin. And also, importantly, you have people at the shrine, on any given day, there are either as many or sometimes even more Hindus than there are Muslims at the shrine. Because in the sort of the religiosity of South Asia, the charisma of the saint is something that is recognized and draws people of multiple religions. So you'll have, and their take, right, their perspective on the sainthood would be different. A Muslim perspective is different from the Hindu perspective in terms of how to think about saintliness and sainthood vis-a-vis the divine. But nonetheless, for both Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs,
I imagine Christians, or I imagine anyone else,
right?
It could be anyone.
There is a sense of, this is someone who has a certain spiritual charisma, who emanates that grace, if you will, barakat, right? Even after their passing. And so, people of all religious persuasions are drawn to the shrine of Nizamuddin Auliya. And so on any given day, it's a very open space in that just anyone can walk in. There's no gates. There's no door.
Nobody's
it's just
checking.
An open
Nobody's checking to see
nothing.
Whether you're Muslim or whether you're, Hindu, or whether you are who you are.
No.
Or what your class is, or
none at all. It's one of the most inclusive spaces that one can experience. You sit in the courtyard of Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya, and next to you will be a Muslim, next to her will be a Hindu. You have men, women. It's not sort of, in the courtyard space, it's not gender segregated.
So it's not even gender segregated.
No, the courtyard space is not gender segregated at all. Men and women sort of will be there cheek by jowl, just sitting, and also men, women, even the Shrine of Nizamuddin Auliya is also very popular among the transgender community. So you will also find transgender folks sitting in the courtyard. And as you say, rich, poor. It's a very, very inclusive space because nobody asks you, what are you doing here?
So there is no gatekeeper.
None at all.
Nobody at the gate to check at all.
No,
who's going in or who's not going in.
And of course because it's a place on the map. You'll also have a bunch of tourists there who are there just taking their pictures and enjoying the vibe. And also a huge draw is the qawwalis, right? Because a very important aspect of Chishti Sufi practice is the use of qawwali, which is a form of we can talk about what qawwali is actually, because that's a different subtopic. But it's a very popular
part of it. Yes.
And so that itself becomes a huge draw for people. So people who are not even particularly religious will be at the shrine, especially on a Thursday evening, because just to listen to the qawwals do their performance. And just to sort of one last point is that the shrine space is also also serves the immediate Muslim community of the neighborhood, because the shrine complex is not just the tomb of the saint. You have the core of the shrine is the tomb of the saint, but then you have this big open courtyard space where people can just sit around and contemplate. Then you have a mosque in the shrine complex, where again there's a men's section and a women's section, so both men and women pray at the mosque. During Ramzan, iftar is served to anyone who shows up, free food after the sunset prayer.
Food is an integral part.
And almost every day free food is served to poor people at the shrine. There's also sort of a small library space. So it's kind of a multi-purpose sacred space. And people are drawn to it for many, many different reasons.
So then what we're saying is that even though he's not there yet, and he hasn't been there since the 13th century, there is something about his there are things about his teachings, his beliefs, the things that the traditions that he left behind of inclusivity and togetherness and brotherhood and helping people in need, and the idea of ishq and love for humanity, that seems to resonate with people today, or from all walks of life. So tell me a little bit about that, about what is it exactly about his teachings or about him that draws people?
Before I speak specifically to Nizamuddin Auliya, I will say in general, with shrine-based Sufism, there is a belief in this. If I remember the concept correctly, the term is Zinda Piri, the idea of living sainthood. So for a lot of folks, he is not dead. He is very much still.
I mean, his spirit, in spirit.
Yes,
he's there.
He's there, right? That his presence. That it's not just a tomb. It's not. It's that he lives. He lives in some form, in some essence, in the shrine. It's sort of related to these sort of Sufi, two connected Sufi concepts of the saint having achieved oneness with the divine through annihilation of the self, which is fana, and on achieving fana, the saint is then rendered permanent within the divine essence, because the saint has now become a part of the divine, and the divine being infinite and the divine being eternal. The saint too then, as part of this eternal entity, is rendered eternal, and so that is baqa, or permanence. So you have these dual Sufi concepts of fana and baqa, and so this idea of baqa means that for a lot of Muslims, the saint is not considered dead in perhaps physically not here, but very much present at the shrine. So the shrine then is almost like a permanent seat, a court, a place where the saint holds court, which is why the shrine is known as a dargah, which is a court, because it's very much the idea is you go to be in the living presence of the saint, even if it's the saint's tomb that is at the shrine. So that is that idea, the faith in the living presence of the saint, is a huge draw for a lot of people. That proximity to someone who has attained oneness with the divine. But to address some of your, the other aspects of your question, I mean, that has a lot to do with the unique character of the Chishti Sufi order as a uniquely South Asian form of Sufism, in that because the Chishti Sufi order developed in South Asia, and very much at a time period where Islam was still fairly new in North India. Not in India. Islam has been a presence, Muslims, and it's like there have been Muslim communities in India for centuries before the time of Nizamuddin Auliya, but in the south, this is places like Kerala and Tamil Nadu. These are southern coastal regions where merchant communities who interacted with the local the Arabian Peninsula. These are local Indians who interacted with merchants from the Arabian Peninsula. So that's a different historical trajectory entirely. But in North India, the Delhi Sultanate period, which starts in 1206, that really marks the first time where Muslims sort of are much more of a visible presence in North India. And Nizamuddin Auliya is born in 1238.
Right.
So we're talking about just 40 years after the start of the Delhi Sultanate period. So when I said this is a very dynamic period in the sort of socio-cultural religious history of North India, and it is because it is a time period where people of different cultures, different religions are encountering each other, trying to figure out what this other person believes, trying to figure out how you can relate to this other person. And so it is a time period where new forms of religion, I'm not saying Islam and Hinduism, but new forms of Islam, new forms of Hinduism are beginning to arise out of this point of encounter. right?
Almost, I'm sorry to interrupt, but almost as though the other is there for the first time. And so how to deal with the other.
Yes.
Without breaking down or without causing a commotion or without being a total disaster.
Right. Because again, if we have to think about the Delhi Sultanate period, we are not talking about like Ghori or Ghazni, where you have like some, invasive force coming in, looting and pillaging and then leaving.
Returning,
This is not that. This is the Delhi Sultanate period. Nizamuddin Auliya is born in Uttar Pradesh. These are folks who are the first generation of people in North India who are Indian Muslims.
Yes.
Right? Not Muslims from another part of the world, but Indian, South Asian Muslims, right? And so their form of Islam is starting to be shaped by the cultural and religious milieu in which they are raised, in which they're practicing their religion.
The beginnings of Ganga Jamni, I imagine.
Exactly. And you're seeing the same thing mirroring happening among Hindus as well, where there's the encounter with Muslim forms of religiosity, and that's having an impact on the way in which Hindus are also practicing their different forms of Hinduism. So it's a very dynamic period for religion in North India. And it is in that context that you have the development of Chishti Sufism, right? In that it is a homegrown form of Sufism that is emerging as in that Ganga Jamni context. So it cannot be in any way disengaged from the process of the Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, as we say, right? The confluence of these two.
Which was rare because it wasn't happening in Turkey, for example. The populations there were more homogeneous. And so South Asia is very remarkable and unique in that regard, where you did have, for want of a better word, and I think this is a beautiful term, Ganga Jamni, and how the confluence of all these is remarkable.
And the an example of that, of course, is the kind of poetry and music that emerges within the Chishti Sufi tradition, which is really, if someone were to ask me, okay, what is the biggest impact that Sufism has had on India? I would say poetry and music because that is something that people, regardless of their religion or language background, are deeply engaged in and drawn to. People who don't know a lick of Urdu or Punjabi or Persian love Qawwali, love Sufi music. And so that a huge impact, and that poetry and that music, again, is homegrown. It's South Asian form of music and poetry composed in the local languages, right? So Baba Farid is writing in Punjabi. Nizamuddin Auliya's most famous disciple perhaps is Amir Khusro, who's writing in Hindavi and Persian, right? Who's literally reinventing Hindustani classical music. And so you have this, and of course you have Sufis writing in Sindhi, you have, all these local languages that are getting imbibed into the poetry of South Asian Sufism. Yeah.
So, it's remarkable actually from that point of view of how much variety there is in terms of beliefs and customs and how things came together with this idea that that there is a commonality, and you can trace it to Sufis like Nizamuddin, and how they, to this day, are bringing people from different religions and walks of life together. Symbolically, the shrine, it becomes the microcosm of such an idea where we wish that would be the case everywhere. People would understand that you can be inclusive and you can be separate and together at the same time.
Yeah, actually, there is a lovely anecdote and a quote of Nizamuddin Auliya that goes with what you said. In being able to balance, acknowledging difference, but also accepting.
Yes.
And I'm happy to narrate that, but we are at a half an hour.
We are at half an hour. Yes.
So perhaps we can do an end to part 1 and then restart with part 2.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for listening and for being part of our conversation. And, the subject of Nizamuddin Auliya is absolutely not one that we can encapsulate in half an hour or many hours or years, but we are going to continue next time where we leave off today. And Khuda Hafiz and